This is National Educational Television, a program distributed by the Educational Television and Radio Center.
That little scene is something that all of us go through at least once every 24 hours. It doesn't make any difference whether we happen to be young or old, rich or poor, healthy or ill. Still, sleep is something that we must have. Now, the average person spends about a third of his time sleeping, so that if you are, say, 60 years old, then 20 years of your life will have been spent in doing nothing but sleeping. Well, to tell us about sleep, what it is, and how it works, and why it is so important to us, we've invited as our guest on Science in Action an internationally famed psychiatrist who comes to us from the faculty of the University of California, Dr. Douglas M. Kelley. How are you, Doug?
It's fine, Earl. I'm not at all sure, though, I can tell you what sleep really is. We do know a little bit about how it acts. As a matter of fact, it's only in the last 50 years that we've begun to understand the brain changes that occur during sleep. For example, we now know that right in about the middle of this model brain, we'll find an area right here that we call a sleep center.
In other words, when changes take place in that, then we go to sleep.
Well, that's right. We relax all over, and then, too, of course, the brain seems to relax, and even the brain waves, you know, the electrical charges given off during the activity of the brain, change as recorded on the electroencephalograph.
Gee, that's a big word. Let's see, electro would be electric, and encephalo would be brain, and graph would be record, so we have electrical brain record.
That's right.
One thing that has interested me about those is the fact that they are different from waking hours as compared with sleeping hours.
That's right. What happens, Earl, is the ordinary brain wave, when it comes out, is a short type of active wave we call an alpha wave. And then when you go to sleep, the waves get much larger and diffuse. And we call these delta waves. And then, of course, when the individual begins to wake up, the waves get mixed in type.
Suppose we look at our rubber man and see what would happen to him if he were to go to sleep.
Well, as a matter of fact, Earl, most of the changes that are easiest to perceive are inside the abdomen and the viscera. And if we take off the abdominal wall of this rubber model like that, down here in the heart, we begin to discover very definite sorts of changes. For example, if we take the heart out like this, we'll notice that if we listen to a recording of a waking person, it has a fairly active beat. Listen. And then as he begins to go to sleep, it will slow up considerably.
I guess he's awake again now.
Yes, it's come back on more rapidly. Well, of course, that changes the flow of blood. All the blood drains out of the viscera, the lungs, and it drains out of the liver here, and then out of the stomach, and out of the intestinal tract. It goes out to the periphery, to the arms and legs, and of course, out there it makes them swell. This is sometimes why you can't get your shoes on in the morning.
Well, these veins and arteries, of course, during waking hours, say a blood vessel would be about this size, and during sleeping hours, it would relax, and so it would expand, and that means that the blood going through there is going to be under decreased pressure.
That's right. The blood pressure will drop 30 to 40 points in the first few hours. Of course, you relax all over, not just the blood vessels. The big muscles of the arms and legs relax. And then the next thing are the big muscles of the back and the thighs, the neck muscles, And then, of course, the small finger hand muscles, and last to relax are the eye and the muscles around the mouth.
There's one thing I'd like to bring up this time, Doug, and that is this matter of the closing of the eyes when we sleep. Now, there are some animals that don't do that. For example, snakes and even fish. This catfish on the bottom, he looks much the same, whether he happens to be awake or asleep, provided he isn't moving. They don't close their eyes, and yet we have to close our eyes when we sleep. Now, is that always true?
No, we don't actually close our eyes completely. When a person goes to sleep, the first thing that happens is their eyeballs roll up like this. And then, of course, as the eyelid comes down over the eyeball stays up there, and it comes down and closes. It'll flicker a little bit. And eventually, just as you're about to go to sleep with your eyeballs up here, you'll almost shut it, and there'll be a little space about the thickness of 3 or 4 pieces of paper between the upper and the lower lid.
You know, in thinking back, Doug, it seems to me that our senses must go to sleep at a different rate. I can remember being asleep and then having a sound which suddenly would wake me.
Well, they do that. They disappear in a routine fashion. The first that goes is the gross muscle movement, and then you lose the sense of smell and the sense of sight, the sense of hearing, and last, the sense of touch. Of course, when you wake up, it comes back in the other direction, touch, hearing, sight, smell, and the last thing you can do is move your body around.
Well, Doug, our sleeping guest over here, I thought was sound asleep, but now he seems to be moving around a little bit. I wonder if that could mean, does he have nightmares?
No, I don't think so, Earl. Those are the normal bodily movements. You make 30 to 60 a night, about 1 every 7 minutes. That's the way you can tell an unconscious person from a sleeping person. The unconscious person doesn't move.
Oh, that twitch. I wanted to ask you about that. You know, I've had that happen to me. Twitch so violently that it would suddenly awaken you.
Well, did you ever kick anybody out of bed with it?
No,
Well,
not
that
recently.
can happen. It's a reaction of the muscles. When you bend your arm up, the flexor muscles act. When you straighten it out, the extensor muscles. Well, if the flexors are tight and then they suddenly relax and the extensors are still tight, your hand will flip out like that. You're liable to rap your wife right across the face.
And, of course, you're sound asleep while this is going on.
Oh, sure. According to law, in that case, you're totally non-compos mentis.
Yeah, that's something to remember. Now, this problem of snoring, sometimes it's an amusement to other people, and sometimes it's an annoyance. But just
right.
Why do we snore?
Well, that's easy to show, Earl, if we take this model here. We take off this part of the head, we have a cross-section of the nose and mouth. Here's the tongue, these are the nasal passages, and right here between the two is a little area, the soft palate. The air comes in the nose, it flops back and shuts the mouth, but if your mouth is open, then the air simply comes through both passages and the palate flutters and flaps like a flutter valve and you snore.
Now, I notice our guest seems to really be asleep at this time.
Well, he's certainly snoring real well.
One thing I'd like to point out here, Doug, and that is this gadget. This is one of a number that have been developed by various people, a snore ball to help to prevent snoring. Nothing but a rubber ball with a squeaker and a little clamp on the back so that when this is attached to the back of the snoring person in about this position, it theoretically is going to prevent him from snoring.
Well, that's the general idea, you see, when he rolls over in his tossing movements. When he gets on his back, he's more apt to snore, and then this little ball gets down here in the small of his back, makes noises, is uncomfortable, and pretty soon it'll force him to roll over on his face. Of course, it's almost impossible to snore when you're on your face, you see. It simply pushes your mouth shut, and you won't snore. You can get the same sort of effect from this kind of a gadget, Earl. This is a mask that you slip over the face like that, over the head, and you see it holds the jaw shut. As a matter of fact, if you've got somebody in your house that snores and it bothers you, there's only really 2 good treatments. One, tie his jaw shut, and the other thing, get yourself another room.
Well, of course, snoring can be a cause of insomnia for the person who might be listening, but then insomnia has other problems connected with it. Some of them are very deep-seated medical problems.
That's right. Insomnia is a real problem sometimes, but usually, Earl, sleep comes perfectly naturally, and if you'll just let it come, you won't have any trouble at all. What most people do is they start to worry about something. And then they're worrying, they're in bed, and they suddenly discover that they're not sleeping. Then they worry about their lack of sleep. So now they're worried about the worry and about the worry about the lack of sleep. It gets to be a circle. And this, of course, keeps them awake. If you're just comfortable is what you really do. For example, what do you do when you first get ready to go to bed? What's the first thing you do just before you go to bed?
Well, let's see. I guess I would walk over to the window and open it so. Of course, theoretically, that way getting lots of fresh air.
Well, now, there's a great American belief, Earl, and it's fine if you can sleep well with fresh air. But many people get cold. Their head is sticking out and a gale blows through, freezing them to death, and they're uncomfortable and they wake up. Actually, there's no reason you can't leave the window shut, because obviously if there's enough air to breathe during the day, there's plenty during the night.
Well, now, as a youngster, I can remember often liking to, desiring to go down to the bed and pull the covers up over the top of my head. I know parents don't approve of that.
That's right. You just pull the covers right over your head so nobody can see you. Or actually, again, there's no reason why you can't do this. There's plenty of air under the covers. And as a matter of fact, at night, you use much less oxygen than you do in the daytime. This is the reason that magicians can nail people into coffins in vaudeville shows. If a man lays perfectly smooth, well, he won't need very much oxygen.
Well, there are all sorts of things that can be used to help a person go to sleep if he so wishes. Here are some very nice bed socks.
Yes, you can put these on to keep warm.
Here is something for the head. And then a sleep bath. Use this in the bathtub before going to bed. And if you wish, some earplugs to put into your ears to help. All sorts of various things, but looking over here, I see something that crumbless crackers. That's something that's quite unique. I hadn't bumped into those.
Well, of course, whatever you think is good for you is good for you, Earl.
This milk brings up the point of coffee. Now, I don't drink coffee late at night because I'm quite certain that it keeps me awake.
Well, a lot of people think that. I suppose if you're one of these rare persons with a real idiosyncrasy, the thing will. If you take it even at 10 in the morning, you'll be jittery all the rest of the day. But as a matter of fact, most persons can drink coffee at night, and it's been shown that it acts as a soporific, something to really put them to sleep. And then, too, lots of people who really think they're jittery with coffee will drink a bottle of some soft drink full of caffeine and never bothers them a bit. It's mostly in the mind, Earl, how you look at it.
Well, then actually, a case of staying awake at night after you go to bed may be due to the fact that you've been in a stimulated group discussion or something like that, and that has created activity, which in turn has kept you awake.
Well, that's
not
right.
The coffee.
That's right. And here's another little gadget over here. It's a sleep shade. This you put on your eyes to keep out the light, because some people think they sleep better in the dark. If it works, it's for you. Whatever you think makes you comfortable is the most useful thing.
Well, I have some friends who swear by sleep exercises that they do.
Well, they're pretty good. Why don't you try them? Just sit down here in the chair and I'll talk them to you. All you do is you shut your eyes and you say to yourself, my eyes are getting hot and heavy and tired. I'm getting sleepier and sleepier. My eyes are asleep. My mouth is loose and relaxed. I'm asleep. My mouth is asleep. My head is loose. My neck is loose and relaxed. I'm now asleep. I'm getting sound asleep.
Well, actually, you could have kept that up for some time, and I think I probably would have gone to sleep, but that wouldn't do.
Well, the way it works, you see, is the monotony. You simply focus on what you're saying to yourself, and then you don't worry about the day's problems. Some people simply count sheep.
Of course, there are sleeping pills. I know a lot of people do take those.
Well, sleeping pills are a little different, Earl. They have nothing to do with normal sleep. If you take sleeping pills, you should never take them except under the direction of a physician. So there's another myth, too, that I think we ought to explode, and that's the notion you ought to have 7 or 8 hours sleep every night. Actually, you need much less, and if you wake up in between, a good trick is to get a book. Oh, one like this one, say, Martin Chuzzlewit by Dickens. That's dull enough to put you back to sleep in no time, or you can get an almanac and look at the table of facts, and before you know it, your eyes will be closed.
Eventually, then, due to the fact that there's no excitement, no stimulation involved in reading that, gradually, then, you drop off to sleep.
That's right, and when you're sleeping, you rest, and that's almost as good, because, well, let's take, for example, an average man who burns up 3,000 calories a day. He'll use up 1,650 of these calories doing his day's work. Then when he's resting for a few hours, he'll only burn about 750 calories. When he's sound asleep, he'll still burn almost 600. So that you can get along with a little rest and about 5 hours sleep, that's really about all you need. Now, sometimes we have trouble with patients in hospital. They're resting all day. They burn no calories, then they don't sleep at night, it worries them no end.
Well, sometimes we hear about people, I think Thomas Edison was one, who require as little as, say, 4 hours sleep a night. But what I'm wondering about, how long could a person go without sleep and still survive?
Well, there have been some very good experimental studies on that recently, Earl. It's been shown quite definitely that you can go 36 hours without any damage or difficulty at all. Then after that, depending upon you, for the next 2 or 3 days, you begin to get groggier, you feel woozy, you won't be as smart when you think. You begin to be confused, everything will be seen blurred and mixed up, and pretty soon you begin to develop hallucinations. Of course, when you come out of it, you won't remember it ever happened.
Well, this state then is not exactly hypnosis, and it isn't exactly sleep. It's what, in between?
That's what we call it, exactly that, Earl, a hypnotic state. And this hypnotic state, incidentally, has become really important lately. A great many people seem to feel that the Russians have gotten their confessions by drugging or doping people. Actually, the truth is that they keep them awake with stimuli, with drugs like benzodrine and caffeine. And then after 4 or 5 days, the individual in the hypnotic state will sign any kind of a confession and never remember he did it when he wakes up.
Well, now, suppose that I am able to go, say, 36 hours with no sleep. Will I have to sleep another 36 hours after that to make up for that loss?
No, that's the nice thing the body does for you, Earl. No matter how long you go without sleep, it'll probably totally recover in about 12 hours. Another thing is you can't store it up ahead. If you plan to have a rough week where you don't sleep at all, you can't get the sleep in advance by sleeping over the weekend in anticipation.
Sometimes I have the feeling that I wake up in the morning and I get out of bed, and then for maybe 2 hours after that, and I've had breakfast, I'm still in this semi-hypnotic state.
As a matter of fact, Earl, lots of people are. Let's take a look at our sleeping friend here and see what happens to him when he hears the alarm ring. Well, that's a pretty typical pattern, Earl. This individual wakes up, turns the alarm off, goes back to sleep. When he finally crawls out about noon, he probably won't even remember it happened. Then there's another type of individual. This type of person, when you hear the alarm ring, will act in a different way.
He seems to be fumbling around quite a bit as though he didn't know exactly what he's doing. Sort of a stupor, I guess you'd call it. Maybe some cold water would help him to keep from hurting himself when he starts to shave.
Well, yes, if he doesn't wake up, he's liable to cut his throat. He'll get out of bed and he'll put his shoes on and fumble around with them, and pretty soon he'll get dressed, stagger down to breakfast, and maybe a few cups of coffee will help, but he won't remember much about it till he processes out in the street, and eventually he's, in a sort of unconscious way, walking down the street. Then there's a third type, Earl, the individual who, when the bell rings, reacts much like this. He has the alarm off in a second, is out in his shoes, dressed, showered, shaved, has breakfast, is out on the bus in probably less than 15 minutes. Of course, he looks awake, but he really isn't. He's still in the hypnotic state because you don't generally wake up for a half hour or so anyway. Maybe a lot of employers probably shoot me for what I'm going to say, Earl, but the average employer shouldn't expect much from an employee in the first hour of the morning because the persons are still pretty groggy and asleep, although they may not think so themselves.
You know, Benjamin Franklin had a saying, let's see, what was it? Early to bed and early to rise makes a man healthy, wealthy, and wise. And yet, we have a lot of very successful people who don't pay any attention to that at all.
Well, that's very true. A great many people will get up in the morning and they hit their peak about noon, and long about 7, they're tired out and ready to crawl into the hay. Then another individual will get up the same time. He's groggy all day. He gets rolling about 7, and he'll probably go over and wake up that man that's just gone to bed and make him get up and watch a television show.
That could bring some conflict.
Yes, it can. This thing seems to be conditioned or part of your body, and it can give you a lot of trouble if you don't happen to live with somebody who functions like you do. It's too bad they won't let us work, not on an hour scale dependent on daylight, but when we hit our peak efficiency.
I have some friends, and the wife in the family tells me that her husband, when he talks in his sleep, he always tells the truth.
Well, that's not true either, Earl. Let's take a look at our friend over here. Seems to be muttering to himself. Come on now, fella. What are you saying? Sounds like you said blonde. Is that right? Blonde?
Blonde.
Uh-huh. What's that, restaurant?
Yeah.
Did you go out? Did you take the blonde to a restaurant?
Yeah, a restaurant.
Well, what do you think of that?
Seems quite obvious. He had a very pleasant evening. He took this young lady to a restaurant and really enjoyed himself.
Well, now, that may or may not be true. I could have suggested the whole thing as I interrogated him. And then again, speech talking in your sleep is much like dreams. Frequently, it simply represents unsuppressed desires which are coming out in an unsuppressed way, and maybe this is what he wanted to do instead of going to the library like he really did, reading Martin Chuzzlewit.
Oh, that Martin Chuzzlewit again. You know, we often see illustrations in books of sleepwalkers, and always the hands are out like this and the eyes closed. Is that actually what happens?
No, that's another myth. Their eyes are wide open or they wouldn't be able to perceive, and they don't put their hands out. Actually, they can see just as well as your eye. Try this board, Errol. If I put this 2x4 out here, suppose you just walk right along that, and you'll find you can do it quite easily, because you can see and you're not afraid you'll fall off. Now, if we put it up here, try it again, and you'll find you walk a lot more carefully because you're afraid you might slip and maybe sprain an ankle. Now, the sleepwalker, Earl, like you, can perceive, but he lacks the awareness. He can see the board. He doesn't realize how high it is, so he walks along perfectly easy without any difficulty at all, and hence he feels no fear.
Then when a sleepwalker is in a condition like that, you have to be very careful in what you say to him.
That's right. For example, let's take a look on this man up here on that ledge. See, he sees where he's going.
What happens if you shout to him?
Well, one of the dangers, of course, Earl, is if you holler at him, why, he'll wake up. Let's try this up there at him. Hey, you! He made it, you see, but when the awareness with wakening came, he's petrified and almost fell out on his face. Actually, Earl, sleepwalking is, of course, much more common among children than among adults. We really don't know too much about it, but then we don't know as much as we wish about the mechanisms of sleep.
Well, from all these things that you brought to the laboratory, Dr. Kelley, it seems to me that what we should keep in mind is that sleep is always going to be there. It isn't something we should be worried about. We should, if we can't go to sleep, we should rest. And, of course, sleep will eventually come to us. But one thing that impresses me, this is the only program out of a great many that we've had on Science in Action that has made me sleepy. And so, Dr. Kelley, I think after the program, I'll go home and go to sleep.
Maybe that's a good idea. I'll do it, too. Thanks, Earl.
Thanks to you, sir. I'll be back in just a moment with the animal of the week. In temperate and Arctic marine waters around the world, there's a very important group of fishes known as the cottids or sculpins. And these fishes are quite common in shallow water, usually in tide pools. There are some representatives in freshwater noted for their ability to eat trout eggs. Now, one development in this group has been the elongation of some of the fins of the first fin on the top of the body, this sort of a thing here. And we find that best developed in the sailorfish, a very peculiar form that lives in this area of the Pacific coast from Alaska down to this part of the Americas. When we examine the sailorfish, we see that he is well named because of this flag-like sail on the top of the body. Now, when I bring this probe into the tank, we will see what happens to that. It brings it forward immediately. In other words, it's a sort of a warning apparatus. A very beautiful little fish, a member of this cottid or sculpin group. This is one that we obtained on an exchange this past summer with the Tacoma, Washington Aquarium. A very unique fish, lives in cold water, quite often in shallow water. Now, he feeds quite well on small materials that are found in shallow water, such as brine shrimp and other forms. Notice those big fins on the underside of the body, here, right here, the pectoral fins. They are of use in locating food that he might come upon. Notice the dark line through the eye also. That gives him his scientific name, oculofasciatus, meaning the black line through the eye. And then again, notice this wavering fin, which you see here, usually kept in motion constantly as the fish sits on the bottom, as we see in this position. Lives in quite cold water. He's in 50-degree salt water at the present time. And this, again, is the sailorfish the strangest, or one of the strangest of all the fishes in this great group of the marine cottids, a very, very beautiful form from the far north. Well, enough of our little fish. We'll take him back to his special tank at Steinhardt Aquarium and keep him there for future.
You've just seen another in the fascinating television series, Science in Action. Science in Action is produced by the California Academy of Sciences under the supervision of its director, Dr. Robert C. Miller.
The preceding program was distributed by the Educational Television and Radio Center. This is National Educational Television.